I'm Jono Buchanan, and in this video we're going to be looking at exporting track stacks. What this allows us to do is to break a mix down into its constituent elements. Rather than printing one mix file which contains all of the individual tracks within our piece, what we can do instead is to say, okay, these are the drums and these are the synths and these are the strings, here are the individual parts that make up my track, so that we have more flexibility in certain applications. Either we might be sharing individual stems with someone we want to have remix our music, or maybe what we're doing is we're supplying individual tracks into the dubbing stage, maybe for a music for picture project. And someone who's mixing that project needs to be able to have individual control over the elements of a track. So whenever you want to break your track down into lots of individual parts, or just a small group of them, then exporting track stacks can be a really useful feature. And here's how it works. What I've got here is a piece of music which contains groups of instruments. And before we find out what they are, I'll just press play. Okay, so we've got this sort of slightly tense piece of music here, and you can see, and I've made this easy for you to see, that what we've got is these individual colours which represent different constituent elements of the mix. So starting at the top, the dark blue regions are my low percussion, which by themselves sound like this. Okay, so what I want to be able to do eventually is to export this collection of sounds, these low percussion instruments, as one individual stem in their own right. So what I'm going to do is to select all three of these tracks, and I'm going to assign them to a track stack. Remember, to do that, what I've done is to click on the first one, I've held down Shift and clicked on the lower one, and that selects the one in between as well. So all of these are grouped together. And then what I can do is to Control click here and select Create Track Stack. And then I'm going to select the summing stack option, press create, and then what I can do is to rename this, and I'm going to call this low perc for short. And that contains the low percussion instruments within this project. Okay, moving on, we've got two parts. The two next tracks are both sort of mid-range percussion. They sound like this at the end. Both of them playing together sound like this. Okay, so we've got some sort of mid-range toms here. So again, I've selected both of those tracks. Again, I'm going to Control click, and this one I'm going to assign to a new track stack called mid percussion, or mid perc for short. Okay, so there's my second stack. Now, the next track, which is this light blue track, is a top percussion loop. Sounds like this. Okay, so this is just providing some fizz at the top end. Now, there's only one track that makes up the top end of the percussion, but it's still going to be in my interest for this to be a track stack when it comes to the export that I'm going to be doing later on. And also, I might still be working on this cue. It could be that I add more top-end percussion instruments into this project as well. So creating a stack for those is a good idea as well. So again, I'm going to Control click, and I'm going to select Create Track Stack, even though it's only one track, and I'm going to call this top perc. Okay, so that sound folds away into that stack. Here are the synths. Okay, these nice brooding sort of sequence synth parts. So they're going to go into a synth stack. So again, creates a track stack, and this time I'm just going to call this synths, and we'll fold those away. And then we've got one more, which is for the strings. Okay, so we'll select both of those tracks, and by now it's familiar. We're going to create a track stack for them and call those strings. Okay, so what I've effectively got now are 5 tracks. They're track stacks, but they're 5 tracks as far as Logic's concerned. And what I'm in a position to do now is to export them. What I'm going to do is to select the individual elements within this mix. And what I can do is to select them all at once, and then I'm in a position to export them. But just before I do, what I don't want to do is to have this export run on for bar after bar after bar. This Logic project at the moment as with all Logic projects, is capped over here at bar 172. What I'm going to do is to bring that back so it's much closer to the beginning, so I'm setting an endpoint for my export before I go any further. And what I'm then in a position to do is to go to File, to Export, and what I can then do is to see the individual tracks that are available. Now, because of the way that I've selected them, the export option for 5 separate tracks isn't currently available to me. And there's a little strange little workaround here that we have to do. I'm going to come back and select this first track by itself and hold down Command and just go through and select these tracks one after another. And if I go back to the File menu here and come back to Export, I'll now see that 5 separate tracks are available to export as audio files. So again, if you're not immediately seeing a 5-track export option there, come out of this window, select the top one, hold down Command and click on the subsequent track stacks. And then what I've got is these 5 tracks available to me to export as audio files. And when I do that, up pops a dialog box, which is going to show me that it's going to add these to the bounces folder for the project that I'm currently working on, which is fine, that's where I want them to go. And what I'm definitely going to do is to make sure that I add them to my project browser as well. That means that the resulting audio files that I'm about to create are going to become part of this project, which means I'm in a position to check them. Now, what it's going to do is that Logic is going to name these track stacks based on the names that I've given them in the project. So for example, one of them is going to be called low percussion, and I can see that here. If I want to add a custom option, like maybe giving a track name before the low percussion stem, that might be in my interest. But for now, I'm just going to let these stacks export as the names that I've given them within the project, and I'm just going to press export. And what Logic's going to do is to sort of fly through this project or go through and calculate that. And you can see that it's exporting the selected tracks here. We've got this little progress bar showing me that that export is going on. And because I selected the option to add those to the project browser, what I should find is that all 5 of those individual individual audio files have been created here. So what I'm going to do is to drag them into the project. I can just drag them underneath the MIDI. And what I want to do is to create new tracks for them. And I'm just going to press OK. And what we'll do is we'll mute the original MIDI parts so they're not playing. So if we make this a little larger, you can see that what I've got is a series of individual audio files for each of these sounds. And you can see that Logic has actually intelligently cut off the end of the audio as soon as it fades to silence. So it looks to me like the reverb tail, or the sound of the low percussion stem, is the one that lasts the longest, which is why these regions aren't all exactly the same length, whereas some of the others stop a little bit more abruptly. So if we just solo these, I should find that this is just the low percussion. And here's the mid percussion. And here's the top. This should just be the synths. And the strings. So that's great. So what I've got is all of those individual components, musical components, exported as individual stems. And as I said, if you're working with remixers, or if you're looking to move your music on to the next level, or to go and have it mixed professionally, often people like to mix from stems or work with individual track elements. So this is a really nice way of being able to fold your mix down into track stacks and export those as separate musical parts.